She was beaten, starved, and named a stranger within her own walls. "My name is Sad," her heart said, "yet silence answers me." Each morning tasted of sorrow. The thought of the stream held more grief than relief. Then a presence appeared, elder than memory, ignored by every eye. "Child," the woman murmured, "why does kindness tremble in you?" Sade wondered, "Why does my chest feel seen?" The village taught that mercy invites danger and hunger teaches obedience. Still, compassion spoke first, soft as dawn. What Sod did not know was this: some elders borrow skin, some listeners are spirits weighing souls. The woman by the water belonged to the hidden paths of God. "What you give is counted," the voice said, "calm and deep." Those words settled like seeds in patient earth. From that unseen exchange, destiny leaned closer. What followed was not chance, nor noise, nor escape alone. Long ago, before the village paths learned the weight of hurried feet, the elders of the lowland forests would begin their stories by asking a question, and the listeners would answer with their silence. In the farming settlement of Ingiru, where red earth stained ankles and the air carried the smell of palm oil and wood smoke, there lived a girl named Sira. Her name meant patience, though patience had been forced upon her long before she understood its meaning. At 18 seasons old, Sarah already carried the quiet weariness of someone much older, the kind that settles behind the eyes and speaks only when the night is deep. Sarah woke each morning before the guinea fowl cried. The compound was still dark then, shadows crouching against mud walls, ash cold beneath her feet. She swept the yard until it was smooth, fetched water from the stream called Nui, and prepared the fire before her stepmother stirred. Her father had died when the rains failed 3 years in a row, leaving behind a house that leaned toward silence. After his burial, a new woman arrived, and with her came rules that bent like dry twigs only one way. Sarah learned quickly which words to swallow and which glances to avoid. In Endiru, stories were told in the evenings when work loosened its grip and people gathered to rest their bones. The elders said every life followed a path laid down before birth. Yet they also said paths could change when kindness met endurance. Sarah listened from the edge of such gatherings, her hands busy mending baskets, ears open. She heard tales of tortoises who survived by wisdom, of birds who lost their songs through pride, of spirits who tested humans with ordinary faces. These stories did not promise comfort, but they offered understanding, and Sarah held them close. Her stepmother, Maya, had 2 sons of her own. They went to the mission school beyond the hill, their slates wrapped in cloth, their feet washed each morning. Sarah watched them leave, dust rising behind them like unanswered questions. Once, she asked softly if she might learn her letters too. Maya's laughter cut short and sharp. "A broom has no need for books," she said, and that was the end of the matter. From then on, Sarah learned from repetition, the weight of water pots, the rhythm of pounding grain, the way hunger spoke in the body. The path to Nui Stream wound through tall grass and Iroko roots. Women met, their daily voices overlapping, news traded like palm kernels. Sarah greeted them with respect, though many looked through her as if she were part of the landscape. At the water's edge, She often paused, watching the surface settle after her calabash dipped in. Her reflection stared back, thin and uncertain. Her mother used to say water remembers everything, even what people try to forget. One morning, as mist clung low and birds argued in the trees, Sarah noticed someone sitting apart beneath an old silk cotton tree. It was an elderly woman, wrapped in faded cloth, her back straight despite her years. An empty pot rested beside her. Others avoided the spot, their footsteps quickening. Sarah felt the familiar pull between caution and compassion. She remembered the stories. Spirits rarely announced themselves, and tests often arrived disguised as inconvenience. Balancing her full pot, Sarah approached. "Good morning, Ma," she said. The woman looked up, eyes bright as river stones. "Good morning, my child," she replied. Her voice carried the steadiness of drums heard from far away. Without asking, Sarah lifted the woman's pot and set it atop her own load. The weight doubled, pressing down hard, but she did not complain. They walked together in silence until the path divided. There, the woman stopped and smiled. "Patience is never wasted," she said. "It only waits." Sarah lowered the pot, confused, her heart beating faster than the walk required. When she looked again, the woman was already turning away, her steps light, almost unreal. Sarah stood alone, the words settling into her like seeds. She did not yet know what would grow from them, only that something had begun. That evening, as the sun sank and cooking fires sparked awake, Sarah felt the day cling to her skin differently. The compound noises seemed distant, as if she stood between moments, while others ate and spoke. She remembered the woman's eyes and the saying left behind. In the quiet before sleep, she whispered it again, testing its weight. Patience is never wasted. Outside, the night insects answered, and somewhere beyond the houses, the stream continued its slow telling, carrying forward a story that had chosen her to listen first. Tomorrow, she would wake unchanged, yet the world around her had already shifted quietly. The river that forgets its source will dry before the sun sets. That was a saying the elders of Indiru repeated whenever a young person spoke too proudly of tomorrow. It was also the thought that stayed with Sarah, as the days after her meeting beneath the silk cotton tree unfolded like a woven mat, one strand at a time. Nothing in her life changed outwardly. The compound still demanded sweeping. The pots still burned her palms. Maya's voice still cut through the mornings like a cracked bell. Yet something inside Sarah had begun to listen differently. She returned to Nui Stream the next day, and the day after that. Each morning, mist hovered low, and each morning she scanned the shade beneath the trees. The old woman did not appear. The other women noticed Sarah's lingering glances and whispered among themselves. "She stares too much," one said. "Perhaps she saw something she should not have," said another. Sarah heard, but did not answer. In Indiru, silence was often safer than explanation. At home, Maya's temper sharpened. She complained that the water tasted different, that the fire was slow, that Sarah's steps were too heavy. Punishments came swiftly, sometimes without cause. Sarah endured them, as she always had, her face lowered, her thoughts guarded. But at night, when her body ached and sleep refused to settle, she remembered the proverb and the woman's words. It felt as though two voices were speaking to her now, one from the elders and one from somewhere older than memory. On the fourth morning, the woman returned. She sat in the same place, beneath the silkoten tree, her empty pot beside her, her gaze resting on the water, as if listening to a story only she could hear. Sira's heart tightened. Fear brushed against her ribs, but it did not settle. This time, she did not hesitate. She greeted the woman and lifted the pot without waiting to be asked. The weight pressed down, familiar and strange at once. They worked. As they moved along the narrow path, the woman spoke softly, as though continuing a conversation begun long ago. Some burdens grow lighter when shared, she said. Others grow heavier when ignored. Sarah nodded, unsure whether she was expected to reply. Eventually, words slipped free. She spoke of her mother's death, of her father's absence, of a house where love had thinned like old cloth. The woman listened without interruption, her steps steady, her breathing calm. They walked farther than before. The path seemed to stretch, roots twisting like questions beneath their feet. Sarah felt unease rise, but she remembered the proverb, "A river forgets its source at its own risk." "Ma," she asked carefully, "where is your home?" The woman smiled, a slow, knowing curve of the lips. "Everywhere I am needed," she replied. The answer settled heavily, like truth does when it is not meant to be comfortable. At the fork in the path, where Sira usually turned back, the woman stopped. She reached into the folds of her wrapper and drew out a small gourd, sealed with wax. Its surface was smooth, etched with faint markings that caught the light. "Take this," she said. Sira shook her head instinctively. Gifts carried obligations, and obligations carried danger. The woman's gaze soft. "Not all gifts bind," she said. "Some open." Sira accepted the gourd with trembling hands. It felt warm, as though it held breath. Before she could ask another question, a wind moved through the trees, sudden and deliberate. Leaves rustled sharply. When Sira blinked, the woman was gone. The path lay empty. Only the gourd remained, heavy against her palm. She returned home, shaken. Maya noticed nothing but the delay and punished her as usual. That night, Sira hid the gourd beneath her sleeping mat. Sleep came in fragments, filled with dreams of water rising and elders calling her name. Before dawn, she woke and opened the gourd. Inside lay a single object, a cowrie shell, old and polished, its surface marked with age. In Nindiru, cowries were more than currency. They were memory, promise, and passage. Sarah closed her fist around it, understanding only that her life had reached a turning. Outside, the first light crept across the yard. The river flowed on, remembering its source, Karlinchida Storik, quietly, toward what waited ahead. The elders say that when ancestors begin to walk beside you, you may not see their footprints, but you will feel their weight in your chest. Sira felt it from the morning she hid the cowrie shell beneath her mat. It was not fear exactly, nor was it joy. It was awareness, sharp and quiet, like standing at the edge of a river whose depth you cannot measure by sight alone. Days pass. Days. The shell remained hidden, wrapped in cloth, close enough that Sarah could feel its presence when she lay down at night. She did not show it to anyone. In Indiru, knowledge revealed too early often returned as trouble. Instead, she watched Célestinée. She remembered the stories of old, the ones where gifts were tests and silence was a shield. At the stream the old woman no longer appeared, yet Sarah sensed she was not alone. Sometimes the water rippled without wind, sometimes the birds fell silent as she approached. Once, as she filled her pot, she heard her name spoken clearly behind her. When she turned, no one stood there. Her heart raced, but she did not run. The elders taught that fear feeds what it does not understand. At home, Maya grew restless. She complained that Sarah's eyes no longer looked empty enough, that her movements carried a confidence she had not earned. "You think yourself grown?" Maya snapped one evening, striking her without warning. Sarah absorbed the blow, but something inside her did not bend as before. Pain still came, but it no longer defined the space she lived in. That night, Sarah dreamed. She stood in a wide clearing beneath a sky heavy with stars. Drums sounded in the distance, slow and deliberate. Shapes moved at the edge of the light. She recognized some faces, though she had never seen them alive. Her mother stood among them, younger than Sarah remembered. Air eyes, warm, her posture strong. She did not speak, but she pointed toward Sarah's hands. When Sarah looked down, the cowrie shell rested in her palm, glowing faintly. She woke before dawn, her chest tight, her cheeks wet with tears she had not felt full. The dream did not fade like others. It settled. That morning, she tied the shell into the lining of her wrapper, carrying it against her skin. Change arrived quietly, as it often does. On her way back from the stream one afternoon, Sarah met a trader passing through in Diru. He was an elderly man with a walking staff carved with symbols and a bundle of goods balanced expertly on his head. When he paused to rest, Sarah greeted him respectfully. His eyes lingered on her face, longer than politeness required. "You carry something old," he said suddenly. Sarah's breath caught. She said nothing. The man nodded slowly, as though her silence answered him. "Cowrie shells choose their keepers," he continued. "They are not found by accident." He adjusted his load and moved on, leaving Sarah rooted to the spot, her heart pounding. That evening, she knew the time for waiting was ending. She remembered another saying of the elders: "When a door opens itself, do not ask who unlocked it." The next market day, Sarah rose before dawn. She wrapped the cowrie carefully and hid it among firewood in her basket. She did not ask permission to leave the compound. She simply went. The market lay beyond Ndiru, loud and alive with voices, smells, and movement. Sarah walked cautiously, her senses overwhelmed. Traders called out prices. Drummers played near the palm wine cellars. She followed the trader's path from memory until she found a small stall shaded by patched cloth. The man sat there, his eyes sharp despite his age. He looked up and smiled faintly when he saw her. "You returned," he said. Sarah placed the cowrie before him without a word. He examined it carefully, his fingers gentle. "This is not for buying food, aside at last. This is for changing paths." He reached beneath his stall and brought out a small pouch of coins, more than Sarah had ever held. He pushed it toward her. "Use it wisely," he warned, "and remember who you were before it touched your hand." Sarah accepted the pouch with trembling gratitude. She did not linger. On the walk home, fear and hope walked side by side. She expected punishment, exposure, disaster. None came. Mia noticed the extra grain Sera brought home, but asked no questions. Suspicion had begun to mix with something else, uncertainty. That night, as Sera lay awake, the cowrie's absence felt as present as its weight once had. She understood then that the gift had never been the shell itself, but the doorway it opened. Outside, the night breathed steadily. Somewhere beyond sight, ancestors watched. And Sera, no longer merely enduring, took her first quiet step toward becoming. Before important changes, the elders of Indiru poured water onto the earth and waited for silence. They said the ground must be informed before a life could shift its direction. On the morning Sera spent her first coins, the village did not know a ritual had begun, but the earth did. She woke with careful purpose, her movements deliberate, her thoughts steady in a way they had never been before. She did not rush to display what she now possessed. Instead, she remembered hunger and acted accordingly. She bought grain first, enough that the cooking pot would no longer scrape its bottom by evening. She bought salt and oil, then cloth strong enough to last more than a season. Each purchase felt unreal, as though she were acting inside one of the elders' stories rather than her own life. Still, she kept her eyes lowered and her voice soft. Wealth that announced itself invited theft of many kinds. When she returned to the compound, Maya noticed immediately. The food lasted, the meals grew fuller. The son stopped complaining. Maya's eyes narrowed, not in anger alone, but confusion. Where did this come from? She demanded one night. Sera answered simply, I worked. It was not a lie, only an incomplete truth. Maya scoffed, but said no more. Something in Sera's posture unsettled her. Word traveled quietly, as it always did. A neighbor's child fell ill, and Sera brought food without being asked. A widow struggled to repair her roof, and Sera paid a carpenter in silence. She did not linger for thanks. In Endiru, generosity spoken aloud lost its power. People began to look at her differently, as though measuring a change they could feel but not name. Yet balance is never given freely. One evening, Maya followed Sera. She watched from behind a stand of plantain trees as Sera handed coins to an old man whose legs no longer carried him to the fields. She heard Sera speak gently, without pride. When Sera returned home, Maya confronted her, her voice trembling with something close to fear. You think yourself above me now, she accused. Sera met her gaze calmly. No, she said, I think myself responsible. The hand Maya raised froze in the air. For the first time, Sera did not flinch. Silence filled the compound, heavy and complete. Maya's hand dropped. Power shifted not with noise, but with absence. That night, rain fell suddenly, drumming hard against the roof. Sera dreamed again. She stood at Nwihi stream, water rising to her ankles. The old woman appeared beneath the silk cotton tree, her face unchanged. Do not mistake gifts for endings, she said. They are only invitations. Sera woke before the dream could dissolve, her heart steady. The following weeks tested her resolve. Requests came quietly, then more boldly. She gave what she could, refusing praise, setting limits where needed. The elders noticed one evening. They called her to sit nearer the fire. No announcement was made, but inclusion spoke louder than words. Stories were told of women who carried communities through famine, of those who forgot themselves and vanished into dust. Sira listened, understanding the warning. When drought returned that season, it came hard, crops withered, hunger crept back into Indiru, testing old wounds. People who once ignored Sira now sought her out. She gave again, careful not to replace one dependency with another. Even Mia fell ill, her body weakened by fever and fear. When the herbalist failed, Mia whispered Sira's name. Sira knelt beside her, anger and memory pressing against her ribs. "You hurt me," she said quietly, "but I will not carry your cruelty forward." She tended Mia through the night. By morning, the fever broke. Maya wept without dignity, her voice small. From that day she changed, not into kindness, but humility. As seasons passed, Sarah prepared to leave Indiru. She built a small house near the trading road, close enough to return, far enough to breathe. Before she went, she returned to Nui stream. She poured water onto the earth and waited. The wind stirred, leaves rustled. She smiled, knowing the ritual had been accepted. Her path, once narrow, had widened, and she stepped onto it without fear. "Do paths end?" the elder would ask. "They change," the people would answer. "And who walks them?" "Those who are ready." Sira walked her new path quietly. She did not announce her leaving, nor did she frame it as escape. In Indiru, departure carried meaning, and meaning carried consequences. She rose one morning before the village stirred, packed what she needed, and stepped onto the road that curved toward the trading town. The earth was cool beneath her feet, and the sky had not yet chosen its color. Each step felt deliberate, as though the ancestors counted them. Her new house stood near the crossroads, modest and firm, built with care rather than display. Its walls held warmth. Its door opened easily. Sira slept there alone the first night, listening to unfamiliar sounds, feeling both small and expansive. Fear visited her briefly, then left. She had known worse companions. In the days that followed, she began trading in earnest. Grain first, then cloth. She spoke little, observed much, and learned quickly. Traders noticed her fairness. Women noticed her patience. She hired widows, paid them honestly, and dismissed no one without cause. Her name traveled faster than she did, carried by mouths that trusted it. Yet even as her life widened, the stream called her back. Whenever weight settled too heavily in her chest, Sira returned to Nue. She sat beneath a silk cotton tree, listening. One afternoon, she found a girl standing by the water, struggling with a pot too heavy for her narrow shoulders. People passed without slowing. Sarah rose without thinking. "Let us carry it together," she said. The girl's eyes widened. Together, they balanced the load as they walked. The girl spoke softly. "My stepmother says I am useless," she said. "She says I will never become anything." Sira stopped. She turned and held the girl's face gently. "Listen," she said. "No one who can endure is empty, and no one who carries pain carries it forever." At the path's end, Sarah gave her coins for school. The girl wept openly. That night, Sarah dreamed. She stood by the stream again. The old woman sat beneath the tree, unchanged, unbent. "You have remembered," she said. "That is why you were trusted." Sira knelt. "I was helped," she replied. "I only followed the path shown." The woman smiled. "Paths live because people walk them," she said. Years passed, not loudly, but steadily. Sira's traits grew, her house filled with voices. Children came to learn, women came to work. No one left unheard. When drought returned, Sira gave without pride. When floods followed, she rebuilt without complaint. People no longer called her fortunate, they called her good. Maya lived long enough to see the change fully. One evening, older now, she visited Sira's house. She sat stiffly at first. Sira served her food with her own hands. After they ate, Maya spoke. "You were my mirror," she said. "I broke myself trying to break you." Sira nodded. "You were part of my story," she replied, "but not my ending." Peace settled between them, quiet and complete. On the day Sira buried her mother's memory, not in grief, but in gratitude, she returned once more to the stream. She knelt, touched the water, and whispered, "I have become what you prayed for." The stream flowed on. Leaves stirred. Somewhere beyond sight, something smiled. When elders later told Sira's story, they did not speak first of wealth or miracles. They spoke of patience, of silence, of a girl who listened when the earth spoke. And when they finished, they would ask, "Do paths end?" And the people would answer, "They change." Every story reaches a moment when doing good becomes more dangerous than doing nothing. The elders of Indiru warned that kindness, once visible, attracts both need and resentment. Sira learned this truth when her name began to travel beyond the trading road, carried into places where gratitude did not walk alone. It began with the disputes at the market. Two traders argued loudly over measures of grain, each accusing the other of deceit. Voices rose. Tempers followed. When the matter threatened to turn violent, someone called Sira's name. She stepped forward reluctantly. She listened. She weighed. She spoke calmly, restoring balance with fairness that displeased them both equally. The crowd nodded. The matter ended, but the seed had been planted. From that day, people brought their conflicts to her door. Land boundaries, marriage disputes, debts old as memory. Sira listened as she always had, but unease crept into her chest. She was a trader, not an elder, yet the elders themselves began to watch her more closely, their gazes thoughtful, measuring. One evening, a delegation came from a neighboring settlement. They spoke politely, but their request carried weight. They wanted Sira to sponsor a new trading route, one that would pass through disputed land. "It will bring wealth," they said, "prosperity for many." Sira understood the unspoken cost. Others would lose fields. Old tensions would flare. Silence filled her house as she considered. That night, she returned to Nui Stream. The water reflected the moon in broken pieces. She sat beneath the silk cotton tree. Her thoughts heavy. "If I refuse," she whispered, "I turn away from opportunity. If I agree, I harm those who trusted me." The stream answered only with movement. She dreamed before dawn. In the dream, she stood at a crossroads. One path was wide and bright, lined with voices praising her name. The other was narrow, uneven, quiet. The old woman stood between them. "Which path feeds you?" she asked. Sarah looked again. The bright path glittered, but the earth beneath it was cracked. The narrow path was hard, but green shoots pushed through its soil. Sarah woke with the answer already settled. When the delegation returned, she refused. She spoke gently but firmly. "I will not profit from division," she said. Murmurs followed. Disappointment hardened into resentment. That week, rumors began to spread. Some said Sarah thought herself better than others. Some said she hid selfishness behind generosity. Maya heard them and warned her. People forgive poverty more easily than they forgive power, she said. Trouble did not wait long. One afternoon, a fire broke out near the crossroads market. Flames leapt quickly, fed by dry wind. Panic spread. Stalls bornet goods were lost. No one was harmed, but anger searched for a place to land. Whispers turned sharp. If Sarah had invested, some said, the market would have been stronger. Others accused her of hoarding wealth, while others suffered loss. That night, stones struck her door. Sarah did not open it. She waited until silence returned. Fear visited, but it did not stay. She had known hunger, cruelty, and uncertainty. This was different. This was the cost of standing still when others wanted movement. The elders called a meeting. They gathered beneath the great neem tree, faces serious. Sarah was invited to speak. She did not defend herself loudly. She told her story simply, from the stream to the road, from the cowrie to the crossroads. She spoke of responsibility, of remembering one's source. When she finished, silence followed, long and heavy. At last, the oldest elder nodded. "Power without hunger is rare," he said. "We will not punish you for restraint." The crowd shifted uneasily. Not everyone agreed, but the matter was closed. That evening, Sarah walked alone to Nui. The stream flowed unchanged. She knelt and touched the water. "I chose," she said quietly. The wind moved through the leaves, gentle and approving. She understood then that her story was no longer only hers. It belonged to the choices she made when no answer pleased everyone. The elders say a tree does not announce when its roots deepen. It simply stands longer when the wind comes. After the nightstone struck her door, Sarah understood she had entered the season of testing that follows quiet growth. The market returned to its noise, but something underneath it had shifted. Smiles held questions. Greetings carried weight. She moved carefully, not out of fear, but awareness. Business slowed. Some traders avoided her stall. Others watched closely, measuring her reactions. Sarah continued as before. She weighed fairly. She paid honestly. She refused to argue. In time, the noise around her softened, though it never fully disappeared. In Indiru and beyond, memory traveled slowly, but suspicion traveled fast. One afternoon, during the dry heat, when shadows shrink and tempers rise, a stranger arrived at her door. He wore fine cloth and spoke with practiced ease. He praised her reputation, her restraint, her wisdom. Then he offered her a partnership, one that promised protection from gossip and steady profit in exchange for loyalty to interests she did not control. Sira listened without interrupting. When he finished, she asked one question. "If I say no, what happens?" The man smiled thinly. "The road becomes harder," he replied. Sarah nodded. "Then it remains honest. C'est déclined." That night, she returned to Nuei stream. The water was low, revealing stones, long, hidden. She stepped carefully, feeling the uneven ground beneath her feet. She remembered a story her mother once told her. When a river recedes, it reveals what it has been carrying all along. Sarah knelt and pressed her palm to the wet earth. "Show me what I carry," she whispered. Sleep came lightly. Her dream was heavy with symbols. She stood in a field divided by walls. On one side, crops grew tall but tasted of ash. On the other, the soil was thin, but what grew there fed many. The old woman appeared, leaning on her stick. "Do you know why some harvests poison?" she asked. Sira shook her head. "Because the ground was forced," the woman said. "Not all growth is blessing." Sarah woke before dawn. Her decisions settled deeper than thought. The following weeks were difficult. A shipment of grain spoiled unexpectedly. A helper fell ill. Repairs demanded money she would rather have given away. Yet help arrived quietly. A widow she once supported brought herbs that healed the sick helper. A trader she had treated fairly years earlier extended credit without interest. Balance returned, not quickly, but steadily. Then came the girl. She appeared one morning at the stream, struggling with a cracked pot. Sira recognized the look, immediately the tight shoulders, the cautious eyes. The girl hesitated before speaking. "They say you listen," she whispered. Sarah nodded. They sat beneath the silk cotton tree. The girl spoke of beatings, of stolen school fees, of nights spent wishing to disappear. Sira listened until the words finished themselves. "Do you know why the river keeps flowing?" Sarah asked gently. The girl shook her head. "Because stopping would turn it into a swamp," Sarah replied. She helped the girl find shelter that day. She paid her fees. She did not promise ease, only continuity. Word spread again, this time differently. People began bringing their children not for money, but counsel. Elders consulted her quietly, not to surrender authority, but to steady it. Sarah never took a title. She never sat in the elder's circle unless invited. She remained what she had always been, a listener first. One evening, as the harmattan wind softened the sky, Sira returned alone to the stream. The old woman sat beneath the tree once more, solid and present. "You are tired," she said. "Yes," Sira admitted. The woman smiled. "Good. It means you are still carrying something real." She tapped the ground lightly with her stick. "Remember, child, roots grow in darkness." When Sarah looked up, the woman was gone, but the ground felt warm beneath her palm. She stood, brushed the earth from her hands, and walked back toward the road. Day wind rosé, testing the trees. Before the first word is spoken, the ground must be Greek. Before the story moves forward, The past must be acknowledged. That is how the elders begin when a tale nears its turning point. They pour water onto the earth, call the ancestors by name, and remind the living that no path is walked alone. It was during such a season of remembrance that change came to an end. The elders announced a gathering not for celebration, but for reckoning. The rains had been uneven. Trade routes shifted. Old alliances weakened. The village needed guidance that balanced memory with survival. Though Sarah had never sought authority, her name was spoken among those invited to sit close to the elders, not as a ruler, but as a witness. On the morning of the gathering, Sarah bathed before sunrise and wrapped herself in plain cloth. She carried no symbols of wealth. At the neem tree, calabashes of water and kola nuts rested at the elders' feet. Prayers rose slowly, layered with drum beats that echoed the heart. The air felt thick with expectation. An elder spoke. "We call those who remember where they come from," he said, "and those who know where they stand." One by one, people were invited to speak. Some spoke of fear, others of anger. When Sarah was called, she rose slowly. She did not speak of markets or roads. She spoke of the stream, of listening, of choosing not only what brings gain, but what preserves balance. Her voice did not rise. It did not need to. When she finished, silence followed, not empty, but full. Then something unexpected happened. An old man stepped forward, leaning heavily on his staff. Few remembered his name, but all knew his lineage. He looked at Sarah for a long moment. "You carry your mother's patience," he said, "and your grandmother's silence." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. These are not small inheritances. That night, after the gathering dispersed, Sarah returned to Nui Stream. Torches flickered behind her as others followed at a distance. It was not planned, but it felt inevitable. By the time she reached the silk cotton tree, a small circle had formed. No one spoke at first. The stream moved steadily, unconcerned. Sarah knelt. She poured water onto the ground, as the elders had done. If there is something to be said, she spoke softly, let it be said where truth has always lived. The wind stirred, leaves rustled. An owl called from the dark. She did not see the old woman at first. Then she did. The woman stood where the roots rose from the earth, staffing and eyes sharp and kind. No one else reacted. Sarah understood then that this moment was hers alone to carry. "You are nearing the end of becoming," the woman said. Sarah bowed her head. "I am still learning," she replied. The woman smiled. "That is why you are nearly there." She tapped the ground. "The village will change. Some will resist. Some will follow. Do not measure yourself by either. What must I do?" "Shira, ask it." "Stay," the woman said simply. "Stay when leaving would be easier. Speak when silence would protect you. And remember, stories do not end when the teller grows tired. They end when the lesson is complete." The woman faded like mist lifting from water. The stream continued its song. In the days that followed, the elders made a decision. A council of balance would be formed, not replacing tradition, but supporting it. Sarah was asked to serve not as leader, but as guide. She accepted without pride. Resistance came, as it always does. Some accused her of stepping beyond her place. Others tested her resolve. She answered each challenge the same way, with patience, with listening, with refusal to harden. One evening, as she closed her door, Sarah felt the familiar ache of exhaustion. She sat on her mat and smiled faintly. The ache no longer frightened her. It meant the story was still alive. Outside, the stream flowed. Inside, a woman rested, rooted, tested, and nearly whole. When the elders speak of Sarah now, they lowered their voices, not out of secrecy, but respect. They say, her strength was not loud, and her authority did not sit on her shoulders like a crown. It settled in her bones, slow and lasting, like wisdom passed through blood and breath. This part of the story, they remind us, is not about triumph, but about endurance. The Council of Balance met for the first time at the end of the rainy season. Mats were laid beneath the neem tree. Elders sat where they always had. Sarah took a place slightly behind them, as agreed. Her role was to listen first, speak last. This was not symbolic humility. It was functional. Words spoken too early often carry impatience instead of truth. The first cases were small. A dispute over grazing land, a disagreement between two families bound by marriage. Sarah listened, asking questions that revealed more than accusations ever could. She did not decide. She clarified. Slowly, solutions emerged that belonged to the people themselves. The elders watched carefully. Some nodded. Others remained unconvinced. Change never arrives alone. A faction formed quietly, led by men who felt the old ways slipping from their grip. They spoke of tradition while seeking control. They questioned Sarah's presence openly now. Who chose her? They asked. What lineage does she represent? Their voices carried authority because they had carried it before. The elders did not respond immediately. They waited, as elders do, for words to ripen. Sarah felt the tension, but did not retreat. She returned to her routines. She traded. She taught. She listened. At night, she walked to the stream. The old woman did not appear again, but her absence did not feel like abandonment. It felt like trust. Then the drought came early. Fields cracked. Wells thinned. Hunger crept back into conversations. Fear sharpened every disagreement. The faction used this moment well. They blamed the council. They blamed Sarah. Since she rose, the rains have fallen poorly, they said. Some listened. Desperation is a powerful persuader. A gathering was called, larger than before. Voices rose quickly. Accusations followed. When Sarah was invited to speak, she stood slowly. She felt the weight of the moment settle fully into her chest. This was not a test of intelligence or courage. It was a test of truth. She spoke not to defend herself, but to remind them. She spoke of cycles, of seasons when drought teaches restraint and abundance teaches sharing. She spoke of the stream, how it narrows before it deepens. She did not promise rain. She did not offer blame. She offered responsibility. Silence followed, broken only by wind moving through dry leaves. An elder stood, older than the conflict, older than most memory. We forget, he said. That balance is not comfort. He turned towards Sarai. And we forget that those who carry it often stand alone. The faction did not dissolve, but it quieted. The gathering ended without resolution, but without violence. That night, clouds gathered unexpectedly. By morning, rain fell not enough to erase hunger, but enough to restore hope. In the weeks that followed, the drought eased slowly. Crops recovered unevenly. Loss remained, but something else grew alongside it. Humility. One evening, Sarah sat alone at Nui, watching the water rise again. She felt older, though not in years. She pressed her palm to the earth and whispered, "I have stayed." The stream answered as it always had, with movement. Children now followed her path to the water, listening when she spoke, learning when she was silent. She corrected gently. She praised rarely. She taught them that stories are not owned, only carried. The elders say this was the moment Sarah became more than a person. She became a measure. When decisions felt heavy, people asked, "Does this honor balance?" When anger rose, they asked, "Would this hold at the stream?" And Sarah herself, she remained human. She tired. She doubted. She grieved what could not be saved. But she did not turn away. The ancestors watched. They said nothing. They did not need to. Long before the first hut was raised in Indiru, before the stream was given a name, the elders say balance walked the earth as a quiet spirit. It did not rule, and it did not command. It simply stayed. Those who learned to recognize it prospered. Those who ignored it survived, but never rested. This is the spirit Sarah came to embody, though she never claimed it. The years settled gently after the drought. Children born during hardship learned early the language of restraint. The council of balance endured, not without disagreement, but with purpose. Sarah remained part of it until her hair silvered and her steps slowed. She never became the center. She remained the anchor. One season, when the rains were generous and the fields full, Sarah fell ill. It was not sudden. It arrived like evening, gradual, undeniable. Women came to sit with her. Children brought water from Nui. Elders visited quietly. She greeted them all with the same calm she had carried through her life. On her final morning, she asked to be taken to the stream. They carried her on a woven mat, careful and reverent. The silk cotton tree stood tall, unchanged. The water moved steadily, as it always had. Sarah asked to sit. When they settled her at the edge, she dipped her fingers into the stream and smiled. "I listened," she whispered. The old woman appeared then. For the last time, she stood not apart, but beside Sarah, solid as the earth itself. "You did," she said, "and now others will listen because you did not stop." Sarah's breath was shallow, but her eyes were clear. "Will they remember?" She asked it. "Ask it." "They will forget," the woman replied gently, "and then they will remember again. That is how stories live." Sarah closed her eyes. Her hand slipped from the water. The stream flowed on. They buried her near the silk cotton tree, not because she asked, but because it felt right. The elders poured libation. Children stood silently. The village did not wail. It breathed. In the seasons that followed, something subtle changed. When disputes arose, people still argued, but they also paused. When drought threatened, they prepared together. When prosperity returned, they shared more quickly. No one claimed Sarah's place. No one needed to. Her way had already taken root. Children now come to the stream to hear the story. They are told of a girl who suffered and did not harden, of a woman who gained power and did not cling to it, of a listener who became a measure. The elders ask them questions as the story unfolds. Did she seek greatness? No, the children answer. Did she refuse it? Yes. And what did she choose? Balance. The children are taught to watch the water, to notice how it yields without disappearing, to understand that silence can be strength and patience can reshape a village. They are told that not all helpers arrive loudly, and not all ancestors come from the past. Sometimes, when the evening light bends just right, someone swears they see an old woman beneath the silk cotton tree, staff in hand, watching. Other times, it is only the tree and the stream and the wind. The elders say, it does not matter. Presence is not always visible. This is how the story ends, not with closure, but continuity. When the teller finishes, they do not clap. They nod. They sit. Then an elder asks the final question, the one that has traveled with the story from the beginning. Do paths end? And the people answer, as they always have. They change. So the elders end this tale by saying, kindness does not fall into empty earth. Even when eyes turn away, the ancestors are watching. A gentle hand opens doors, a clenched fist cannot, and mercy reshapes destiny in ways no human plans alone. If this story has stirred your spirit, carry it forward, share it as wisdom is shared, from mouth to ear, from heart to heart. Sit with it. Speak of Italiano and tell us, if you stood where she stood, which path would you walk? Until the next story, may your steps remain balanced.